Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pail, steel toe boots?
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure.
Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jaylen.
Can I close it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do? Hey, Boy Manning here. Welcome to a Sunday Celtics Bucks edition of the Garden Report. Post game here. No Dalzell. Myself, we're gonna take over the reins here today. Jimmy, Sherrod, and John are out, and we're gonna talk about a big comeback win for the Celtics. A ghastly loss for Milwaukee at home. This was only the fourth home game, so a chance for them to turn it around. A good opportunity with a big lead early in this game to knock the Celtics out and get their season back on track, but they fall to 2-8 in this one. So plenty of questions on that side, but we'll start with the Celtics, of course. 9-2, 16-point deficit that they erase very fast between the end of the second and this quick burst to start the second. I think it ended up being a 33-14 run, 19-point turnaround there after a brutal start to this game for Tatum, for shooting, and defense, certainly. Grandy had them at like 1-3 points per possession allowed, which by far their worst this year. Worst last year outside of 2 games last year. I know that they went up there, specifically the first one, and got blown out. So the line was weird with this game. Everyone was talking about that. It was like 3 points Milwaukee. Brown was questionable to play. He ends up playing, and it moved to 5. So you looked at it and you're like, all right, Celtics have been double-digit favorites in a lot of these games this year. What's Vegas know here? And Bucks got off to a great start for some reason or another, but end up collapsing here. And credit to Tatum, who got to the free throw line a ton. Holiday had some big plays in this game. White as well. The guards in the backcourt, excellent for Boston, whereas on the Milwaukee side, they're just praying for productivity on that side. So that's where this game swung. I thought Tatum got back in a groove. Decent game for Brown in his return from injury. And the Bucks, outside of Giannis, who poured pretty much everything he had into getting a third win for the Bucks here, just don't seem to have enough around them.
Yeah, I think the story of this game was the defensive switch that happened at the half. They scored 38 points, Milwaukee, in the second half after scoring 69 in the first. And Drew Holiday and Derek White were both instrumental. I tweeted this out, but this was the perfect example of why you can't box score watch, because Derek White's stat line was pretty normal, 15 points, 6 of 12 shooting, 6 assists, 6 rebounds. It's a nice stat line, but he was just monumental. Some of the plays that he had down the stretch, Drew Holiday the same. And then this would have been out of reach if it wasn't for the fact that Pritchard went off in the first half, because they were getting nothing. They were still down by 15 and he was hot. So it would have been a 25-point deficit, a whole different situation that we're talking about. And rather than being down by 12 at the half, something like that, it would have been a whole, much more insurmountable deficit. And so a lot of guys did a lot of good things. And I think this just goes to show you these are the kinds of games that the Celtics are just comfortable winning. I don't think they ever have a moment where they doubt themselves. I think that's part of the confidence of coming off the championship. And you saw that today, another 16-2 trail early on, kind of wild to see the exact same score. But I think they just were able to do the things that make them them. And down the stretch of the defense, it's like, why can't we see this in the first quarter? Because just absolute lockdown. There was a couple of possessions that were like picture perfect, where the Bucks just had nothing going for them.
Yeah, they went to some switching that I thought stopped the Bucks 3-point shooting, because that was what killed Boston early. In the end, the Bucks shot 40% from 3. So that's where they had some trouble, particularly in transition. I thought the Queta Horford did pretty well defensively in this game, and that started to crumble a little bit late when they went at Queta and they had to go back to the smaller starting lineup there, which was solid in the second half after that awful start that you mentioned there. So they had to look for some defensive looks, that could work against Bucks and what they were throwing at them. I thought it was an interesting move leaving Giannis on an island for a lot of this game, and that's something Joe will do, right? Try to get one guy to go off against them and shut off everything else, and that ended up working by the end of this game, because Giannis had 30 in about 2 quarters and change, but then he just ends up fading late,
the other guys who are hitting threes, Lopez missed one later. Connaughton, went 1 of 2. Green actually had a great game for them off the bench, but Andre Jackson just doesn't give them enough offensively. And so felt like they were trying to let Giannis get his. He goes for 43, 13, and 5 in this one with a couple blocks, and they lose. Not only did they lose, but they lose his minutes by 6 in the end here. So that's what I'd imagine the game plan was here, is to just let him get his and steal off the other guys, especially after halftime. And, offensively, I thought the Celtics figured it out a little bit too. But it's a good point with Pritchard, who 5 of 6 start from this one, hitting some ridiculous threes, keeping the Celtics in it. He saved them in this one.
And I think it's back-to-back games, honestly, with that starting group coming out. Different starting group. Jaylen Brown back today, looking a little rusty, but in either case, both times the starting group went down 16-2 within 2 minutes. And having Payton Pritchard coming off the bench, we've talked about, is he ever going to be a potential starter for this team or closing? But in this situation, it was this is why you want him to come off the bench, honestly, because he came in and it's you just see this release valve for the offense, because he did bail them out a number of times. And so, yeah, I think, he was crucial to just giving them a chance. Second half, he was less of a factor, but at that point, it was kind of the regulars were able to kind of do the things that they've become accustomed to doing. And Bobby, I think, Giannis had ended up finishing with 42 points on 18 of 29 shooting. It's a good stat line. I mean, he was efficient, but I think you live with it. I think you live with 42 points from him on 29 shots, because we did the same thing with Embiid last year. We've seen it at time in and time out. They'd rather have one guy do it, and that's always my philosophy. I'm teams should let Tatum do that. Take 30 shots. So I mean, I think everybody has their own approach to it, but in this case, I mean, you look at this box score; it's so lopsided. He just doesn't have enough going on his side. I mean, Damian Lillard is going to need to be better. They're going to need a couple guys to step up the way the Celtics have 5 or 6 guys that they can count on to go for 20 if they need to. And so, yeah, this Bucks team 2-7. I guess there was some foreshadowing last season, but I did not expect the start for them.
No, and I don't want to do the Bucks post game here, but it is a big deal. Them sinking, Philly sinking. Those are 2 teams you thought might be the biggest threats in the East. After the last game, I thought the Bucks showed that they can play the Celtics specifically pretty well, and I think that's the case here in this one too. The pace bothered the Celtics a little bit. The bigs, the way they played, Lopez standing out in the 3-point line and Giannis being in different spots, I think that affected Queta, and the Celtics were a little reluctant to keep him out there for long stretches because of the defensive issues he had in this game. But, you can't go to Tillman for very long. Cornette played 5 minutes on his return from injury. So it's still a matchup that I feel like can bother the Celtics. But on the Milwaukee side, you go to Andre Jackson and you get some good energy from him in these couple of games here, but he can't shoot. You go to Green and he's exclusively a 3-point guy who's a bit of a target on defense. And, back to your Tatum point about letting him go off, they're bringing all this help because they're targeting Lillard, they're targeting all these different guys. And you're just able to throw it out to White for a 3. At one point, Giannis came right off White and left him wide open for a 3. Holiday's getting good looks off that. And it's just another team that's selling out to stop Tatum. And they did. This wasn't a great Tatum scoring game, but he's still spraying the ball around. 6 assists, 5 turnovers, and this one's tough, but still producing good shots for other guys and keeping everybody involved. And there's just play after play in this game where he's spraying out to guys for huge threes. And then he got himself a big one late.
I'm correcting the record, this comment. I'm not saying Tatum's going to shoot the Celtics out of games, but I just think in general, the Celtics have so many weapons that the way that the teams defend them, you're giving other guys a chance to my opinion. I think it's just making their lives easier. He's just so comfortable passing out of the double team now that if he's a guy that struggles with that, then it's okay, put him in that position. But I think he welcomes it. You can see it, that he's waiting for the double team to come and he just makes the right pass now. So it's not that I think that if they let him shoot more, it would go poorly for the Celtics. It's just this clearly hasn't worked well. And the Warriors did it a little bit better than most teams that we've seen. And so I guess that's the vision that teams have when they're going for that approach. But I mean, he wasn't efficient in this game, but I thought that he did a lot of good things and he made a lot of big passes. Again, I feel like his assist numbers are not matching up with his passing. And I know I've been seeing the stats around his potential assists being a lot higher, and we can talk about potential assists, hockey assists, whatever we want to call them, but he had some really key passes down the stretch here, and then he finished with 6 assists, and I'm like, I feel like he's not getting rewarded for it. I hope people are noticing that the playmaking leap has continued this season.
Yeah, in terms of potential assists, let's see where he is right now. He is averaging 13? No, 11 a game. And that's high for him, I feel like. I feel like if we're looking back at last season to compare it, he had not that many. Let's see. Yeah, he's not even in the top however many last year. He had 8.9 last year, so he's up almost 3 in terms of potential assists.
Yeah.
Which, big difference. Big difference. I want to get a little deeper into his game because it did start slow, finish strong. And he got hurt in this one as well. It looked like he played through an ankle injury that he suffered on a Giannis collision, which typical for these games. I'm sure the chat's thrilled about that one. CLNS, your code over at Prize Picks tonight. Prize Picks, the best place to play daily fantasy in football. It's mostly in the rear view today, but you still have your night game. So you can head over there, make a fantasy team for the night game. All you got to do is pick 2 players in that game or any game. You can mix it with Monday night as well. You got the Lions and Texans tonight, Dolphins and Rams tomorrow, Cooper Kupp, Williams back for the Lions. There's all kinds of great options on both these teams. Gibbs, of course, Tank Dell, and you can go over there, pick more or less on their stat projections. And that's your team. There's injuries everywhere, more injuries this week across football. It's just part of the game, part of basketball as well to start this year. So luckily you have injury insurance that keeps your team in play if a guy goes down in the first half. And you pick a new team every week. That's the beauty of daily fantasy, and they're our official daily fantasy sports partner here at CLNS Media. Play play a $5 lineup and get $50 instantly right now over on Prize Picks with that code CLNS to let them know we sent you. And of course, check out the Game Time app as well right now. Celtics going to be back in Boston for the NBA Cup this week. Yes, you got the court, you got the crazy looking jerseys. And if you want to see them, you can head over the Game Time app. It's going to be Celtics and Hawks over there at TD Garden. And midweek, usually a good time for some deals. And right up until game time and even a little after game time is usually when you're going to get the best deals on the Game Time app. All-in pricing lets you know exactly what you're going to pay. You get panoramic views of your seat if you don't know where you're sitting or have never sat in that location before. That's great. And they're throwing in $20 off your first purchase right now. Terms apply. So go check out the Game Time app and let them know CLNS sent you by using that code CLNS on your first purchase. Game time. What time is it? It's game time. So let's dig a little deeper on Tatum's night. I want to get to Brown as well here, who played after missing 4 games there with the injury. But Tatum, I feel like, I guess last game too, and even this game, the malaise is starting to hit a little bit. You go back and you watch the film of last game. The defense wasn't on his level. It just wasn't a great defensive game for him. And this one, at least offensively, feel like he was easing into it a little bit while the Bucks were flying up and down the floor. I mean, the pace of this game caught him off guard. I feel like caught the whole Celtics team off guard, and they had to play to that Bucks pace for a lot of that first half. Now, credit to the Celtics, who I feel like are much more comfortable playing that up and down kind of game now compared to maybe a few years ago. So they were able to hit shots. They were able to hit, some transition runouts, things like that. His transition numbers to start this year, by the way, and I gave him a lot of credit last game before you came on, Noah, for the way he got the Celtics going in transition against a Nets team that was keeping them pretty stagnant in the half court. And he has some ridiculous numbers in transition to start this year. So that was a key to them staying in it tonight. Now you have Brown back in the mix. I think that helps you all the more, being able to play a fast-paced style of game. But they had him sped up. They had the Celtics sped up early. And that 16-2 hole you mentioned, I wasn't feeling great when they were falling into that, particularly with him turning the ball over a little bit in this game and not shooting the 3-ball at a high level in this game. And he had some empty possessions midway through. But as you mentioned, the passing carries him through. A late 3, critical in this game. I think they were leading by 3 or 4 at that point. It gets it up to 7. So managing the game, staying with it through struggles, And it feels like every night we're looking up, no matter how he looks midway through, and he has 30. And, regardless of the personnel around him too, everybody's back in this game and he still has 30. So this, I know John predicted preseason it was going to be a little bit more of a step back for him scoring wise this year, but whether due to the efficiency or the volume they needed from him in a game like this, he's scoring 30 every night.
Yeah, and honestly, I had the same prediction as John. I thought that he was going to take a little bit of a step back scoring, and he obviously hasn't. And part of it was Jaylen Brown's injury, and we can talk more about Jaylen, but I think he's still not completely himself here. But the free throws, I mean, that's what we want to see from him, right? We want to see him get to the line, and we want to see him, get free throws. And so
and
this
he's
is one of
never
those
shot
games,
free throws like this. He's shooting more free throws than ever before.
That's kind of the big takeaway on him this season so far. I think that's the biggest, his biggest noticeable jump is just how much he's been getting to the line. And you always worry about that because I feel like officiating can change throughout the season. And I'm not saying I don't think the officiating has been soft by any means, but I feel like anytime a player is just going to the line more for a stretch, it's like you don't know if that's going to last. But yeah, also with the 7 for 21, I don't want to be like an apologist, but he makes 3 more shots. He had a couple that were just like in and out, good looks, good clean looks. And now we're talking about like a monster performance, right? We're talking about he scored 37 points on 10 to 21 shooting, and the rest of it persists. So I thought he had a good game. I thought he has just been really consistent this season with just finding ways to score, and they've needed it more than we expected because they've been down to, all-star caliber scorers in Jaylen Brown and Porzingis. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that I think the defensive thing is, the defensive moments for him, like the lapses, they've definitely been apparent in both of these last 2 games. And I actually felt like post-game previously, I don't know what they're saying right now as post-game's occurring, but after what was the last game?
Nets.
Yeah, after the Nets game, Joe said, we challenged him at halftime to play the best defense that he can play. Drew Holiday said something similar. And Joe will never like criticize players, post game to us like at all, but I thought that was as much as we'll ever get as far as like he wanted Tatum to play better defense, and he felt like he turned it around midway. But there is something to be said that like sometimes these in the beginning, like he starts slow on the defensive end, and I do think it sets a little bit of a tone. And so like Jaylen has made a point of being the guy to set the tone defensively, but I think that's like an area where why are they having these slow starts? Like that's an element there because you don't want to get in that habit. And Al talked about it last game too. Like we really can be easing into these games.
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about with their defense. It was awful early. Absolutely dreadful. Yeah, transition still an issue for some reason or another. I know Joe's always talking about them setting up their defense and transition with offense, but sometimes it's just as simple as getting back and being in right positions there, not losing guys, and they're doing that a lot to start this year. It's gotten a little bit better. I looked it up coming into tonight. They were 15th. But obviously they were number 1 a year ago. So it's a standard they still have to get back to. They were 5th overall in defense coming into tonight. What were they last year? Like 2? So they're not too far off, but they are a step behind where they were last year. And a lot of that, we've mentioned it, you don't have Porzingis here for a long time. Last year, you'd have little stretches where you didn't have him, but there was never this massive stretch in the regular season where you didn't have him rim protecting. And someone put a stat out there. I'm trying to find it and go back to it, but the first 5 games of the year, the Celtics were giving up, this is Drew Carter, 72% at the rim, which was a big problem early on. And we were saying, all right, they're trying to take threes away. Are they giving up the rim so they don't give up the 3? But it was awful at the rim to start the year. That was 28th in the league, giving up 72% inside. Then the next 5 games after that, which is obviously where Queta came into the mix, 58% at the rim. And not all him, but him playing a lot more. A little bit more of him, a little bit more double big, which they went to in this game at times. And they're the number 1 team at protecting the rim in 5 games coming into this one. Now, I don't have the numbers for tonight yet. I'll pull those up shortly here. But defensively, I think the biggest reason we're seeing them fall back this year, and it's not a panic moment because I think there's a valid excuse here and guys are coming in and out of the lineup. They're mixing and matching rotations. Different centers, Horford's at center a lot more, who's not quite the same rim protector he used to be. Cornette hasn't been the same rim protector this year either, I would say. So that's been a weakness for them early on alongside the transition. And it's not like they're struggling defensively, but they're a little below where they were last year.
Yeah, definitely. And again, like I think Porzingis was such a revelation defensively last season when they everybody was talking about how he was going to be a release valve against the zone defense and what he was going to add offensively to the Celtics when they traded for him. And then I think the part that continued to be underrated all season was the defensive side. And so they got through it in the playoffs, and I think Al Horford was a huge part of that. Jaylen Brown individually, a lot of guys individually had really masterful defensive performances. I would actually say like all 5 starters, really, that was maybe one of the biggest highlights of the championship run. But it's hard in a November game to play that way for 48 minutes, and I think we're seeing the ebbs and flows of that. But we're also seeing that when it's crunch time and when they need to get a stop, like we have seen, with the exception of the Warriors game, which there were some defensive lapses down the stretch, like we've really seen them buckle down in a lot of these games versus Indiana, which they lost, but down the stretch there, like that was a huge part of why they were able to even get to overtime. Tonight, I mean, it was just unrecognizable, the defense. So part of it is like, I'm not that concerned because I don't think it's an inability to defend. I think it's a little bit of it is just hard to lock in for the entire game in November when you're going to play 100 games this season, so I attribute a little bit of it to that. And there were some moments with Queta today that I thought that he made some mistakes, which I'm glad because I want to see him play against Giannis. I mean, we've talked about this, but we want to see him in these like premier matchups against the best post players in the league. And I'm sure he got a ton of valuable experience today, and anything that went wrong or right today, he's going to rewatch and learn from. And so that was just something else that stood out on the defensive side. Like I think there's going to be next time he plays against the Bucks, like I think he'll be a little bit better. Not that he was bad, but I think there were moments where I'm like, okay, I think this is just like a kind of uncharted territory for him.
Yeah, and it's tough right now. You can't use Cornet in this game. I don't know if he was limited by the injury or what, but they used him for that one stint, never really went back there. And Queta, you just didn't feel the trust coming from the sideline for him in this one. And as I look at the rim numbers here, 18 to 24 for the Bucks inside. So a step back again for the Celtics defensively in this game, and a tough matchup against a team that went at them full throttle at the rim, put them in actions. I actually liked some of the sets that the Bucks ran in this one that just kept the Celtics off balance. A lot of backline dunks for the Bucks here, and then a 3-point shooting night for Milwaukee that stretched the Celtics out. And they went to some switching in the third quarter. There was a stretch where both teams were missing threes back and forth for like 10 possessions there at the end of the third, where I feel like the Celtics finally found their groove, at least stopping the 3-pointer in that second half, but they never really figured it out defensively. And for Queta in this one too, and I can already feel it coming. The chat's going to kill me here because I'm, ripping Queta a little bit or criticizing him. Just like Joe says, and Joe said it too, you just want to see him figure it out. You want to see him have that trust with the coaching staff. You want to see him reach a point where you can say he's your third center when Porzingis comes back and, put the other two guys in the rear view a little bit there, not to make it the battle again, but you want Queta to carve out his spot and make it indisputable there because of the ceiling. But whether it's the missed shots, which still finishing, like you want to be closer to 70% if you're him. There's still a few misses every game that keep him below that. And then defensively getting stuck in between the pick and roll a lot of the times. I don't know, did he foul in this game? I don't think there was much of a fouling issue in this game, but it was more of a positioning one for him.
No, only one foul, which I don't want to brush off because that was the biggest concern with him early on last season was he just couldn't stay on the floor. Because he come in and just rack up like 4 quick fouls. And so he's figured that out too. I mean, that's a good point. One foul in 20 minutes versus Giannis, like that's good.
Yeah, no, and they still go with him 20 minutes there. So they want the size, they want the rim protection. And again, I'll say it, that double big combination, probably their best defensive stretch midway through the third quarter there and a little bit into the fourth as well. You close the game strong. I was wondering, do you play 3 guards with Pritchard to keep him involved in this game a little bit more, especially where he's amazing in that first half? Or are you going big here to try to shore up the defense? And they went a little bigger and shored up the defense in that second half. And I'll try to have the Bucks second half numbers here in a minute when I can toggle them here. But it's kind of that highs and lows game for Queta. Unfortunately, he was able to survive for 20 minutes there and keep the Celtics competitive in his minutes. But it was really the single big, Horford, and the starters with Brown back in there in this game. And Brown, as shaky as he was offensively, I thought had a pretty good defensive game. That's what rode you to victory here, rather than Pritchard, who only played 9 minutes -5 in the second half. Only 4 minutes of Hauser in the second half, who wasn't good again in this one. And then Queta 10 minutes of double big where they were -2. So pretty good lineup flexibility across the board for the Celtics into the second half.
Yeah, and again, like there's the dual objectives here. There's the trying to get the win, and there's also the fact that I think a lot of what we're seeing early on here is experimenting and working on things in the long term. And so I thought Queta, again, I don't want to be a broken record, but I'm so glad that Queta got 20 minutes in this game because I feel like this was the exact opportunity that we've been looking for since last season. That there were so many moments where I was like, I just want to see Queta go against Embiid. I just want to see Queta in these positions. And I think that he actually, like, in a sense, he had a less good game than he's had the last few here, but he actually like held his own, and holding your own against Giannis is more than most people can say. And I do think that they figured something out in the second half against him. He still finished with a lot of points. Like what did he have? 29 at the half. So he had 14 in the second half. So it's not like they shut him down. But I felt like they were making life a lot more difficult for him. And besides for him, they really weren't getting much going. So I don't know. I don't know if we could grade this Queta game. I would probably give him like a B. I don't think it was like disaster performance at all, but he wasn't perfect, but it's when you're going against Giannis, like you're not going to be able to put together something much better for that. But considering his limited NBA experience, like that's kind of what I'm going back to.
Yeah, and there's one great play where he switched out on Prince, blows up the play, runs in transition, and it was one of those moments you're like, what's going to happen here? You don't see Queta running with the ball in transition much, and the Bucks did get back and knock it off of him. So that was a great play. That would have been the highlight of his game if it didn't.
I know. I was already pulling my phone out for the video. Yeah, that's like when Al goes full court once in a while, and you're like, it's not going to work. But I like the ambition. He had some good defensive plays. That was another one. A couple that didn't pan out.
I'm gonna go C+ like the commenter here. Again, I'm just being fair with him, and I think I've reached a pretty great place with him where I'm holding him in high esteem. I'm saying you got to try to play him as much as possible, even at the expense of Luke, which is where I think they are at this point, especially after Luke's injury. So, I'm just pointing it out like I see it here, and I guess I'm just gonna be a Queta hater according to the chat.
No, Bobby has been a big Queta fan behind the scenes. I want you guys to know.
Yeah,
it's just
since
funny
day
when
one.
you say it's just funny when you say you've reached a good place with him. It's like you guys are like your relationship has reached a good place.
Well, that's the other thing too, covering him. I mean, I've been to his events. I was all over them signing him. I've really loved the growth from him. We were both there in Atlanta when he played the G League game, and we interviewed him.
Yep, he went all the way. Yeah.
So yeah, we've been tracking Queta since day one here, and the people just don't care. All right, let's go on to Jaylen Brown, who he took a charge on Giannis at one point in this game, if I remember right.
Yep.
Right? He 3-point shot's still not really there, so he's now two of his last 26 from three since before the injury. So that's something you're looking at here, and you're like, oh, that's not in a great place right now. But overall, considering the time he missed, considering that he's probably not 100% coming back from the hip yet, he just missed 4 games, so can't imagine it healed completely over that time. Thought this was a solid game for him, just trying to find some rhythm. There's still some moments in this one where he's over dribbling a little bit and bogging down the offense, which he'll do at times sometimes. But having him back in transition, having him to crack open the defense, there were some great finishes inside, off passes that I feel like were important for the Celtics on their comeback push here, and then free throw shooting. I feel like what you've pointed out has been a little better for him this year. In this game, he ends 5 of 6 at the free throw line, which you'll take. So all in all, definitely. He didn't look physically limited either. So you'll take this for a return game.
Yeah, I think the story with Jaylen Brown is the fact that he played 37 minutes today. And a week ago, we weren't sure if this was maybe going to be an actual serious injury. So I'm confident that it's probably not at this point. You're not going to force him back with the Celtics winning games without him. And this was a good game. I mean, Milwaukee-Boston's always going to be fun, but it's not like this was like a, massive matchup that he just couldn't miss. So I think, the Jaylen Brown thing is that you can just, you can worry less about the injury. And now it's more about, I did think he was missing a little bit of explosiveness. Like there was a couple plays where I'm like, okay, that doesn't look like Jaylen Brown at his best. And that was before he was missing time too. We just didn't know why. So there's something still bothering him, but I don't think they would have cleared him to play if it wasn't for the fact that he was getting better. And I also think that he's just a tone setter for them. Like there was a couple moments where he's just guarding Damian Lillard 3/4 of the way, like 90 feet. And it just, you could just tell when he's not there that there's a certain level, there's a certain edge that the Celtics just lack a little bit. And not always, but there were moments throughout these 4 games where I'm like, you can really feel his absence. And tonight, I think you could feel that he was involved and engaged. And even though offensively he was not himself, like there was other things that he did. And just his, his competitive spirit, the stuff with Giannis, like you said, like there's just nobody else really like him on this team from that standpoint.
Yeah, some fun moments with Giannis in this one too. The fake handshake after one of their collisions early from Giannis, and
people were so mad about that. It was just like corny, but it was people were not happy.
It was Giannis being Giannis, which he went at them here, and Jaylen had to guard him quite a bit in this game and held up pretty well, I feel like, in spite of Giannis just going crazy. Giannis scores 43. Celtics go down by 16 right before halftime, but come back just minutes into the third quarter and move to 9-2 this season on a 1-game road trip here. So they'll be back at TD Garden for 1 game as well. Face the Hawks on Tuesday. It's the start of the NBA Cup, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But first, I want to tell you about HelloFresh, which is back on the Garden Report here with a great offer. As always, you can't pass up any offer that HelloFresh is bringing to the table here. Why? Because America's #1 meal kit. You know about them. We've told you many times in the past. Farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients, seasonal recipes. It's fall going on winter here, so I'm sure they got some new stuff on the menu over there. They always do. And they bring it right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store, which is key this time of year. Groceries get extra wild pushing up against Thanksgiving. And count on HelloFresh to make your home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. We all know home-cooked meals are so much better for you, but you don't always have time to pull it off. I've been eating out a little too much lately, so I'm going to get back on my rhythm with HelloFresh here of cooking, getting the fresh ingredients. To do it, pre-packaged and pre-portioned. They handle all the meal planning, shopping, and most of the prep. It's easier than ever to get dinner on the table, quick and painless. No more endless recipe searching or spending money on a whole jar of spices only for a pinch. With HelloFresh, everything you need to make delicious meals comes right to your door, pre-portioned and fresh. Eating out also costing way more money than ever before. It cost me over $30 to get takeout last night. With HelloFresh, it's a much better experience. And again, home cooked meals are much better for you. So step-by-step recipe cards make cooking simple. They even have quick and easy recipes. There's over 50 choices on an ever-changing menu. Just pick your meals and your delivery date. It's that simple. So for free breakfast for life, that offer's back. As long as you're using HelloFresh, go over there, HelloFresh.com/freegarden, and you'll get 1 free breakfast item per box while your subscription's active. That's a free breakfast for life over at HelloFresh.com/freegarden. America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh. Also one of my favorite sponsors here that I've used constantly since we started working with them here at the Garden Report. So great offer and a great service over there at HelloFresh. Check it out, try it out, and see how it'll change your meal prep here. All right, let's get back to it. Where do you want to go next, Noah? We talked a little Pritchard, Tatum, Brown.
Let's talk how the Celtics were exploiting Damian Lillard on defense, because I think that there's an element to the Celtics team that's underrated in the sense that nobody can really be exploited on their end. And we talk about Pritchard sometimes, like from a size standpoint, he can, but he's a good defender comparatively. Damian Lillard, like their game plan really started becoming like whoever he's guarding, just go at him. And I don't always love that from a viewer standpoint because it starts to get a little clunky. And sometimes I think they can overhunt that mismatch, but it worked. It worked in this game. And it's just another reminder of like when that the Celtics don't have any stars that are able to be exploited like that. In fact, quite the opposite. And they put him in some tough situations, and I don't even think they capitalized as much as they could have. Like there were some Jaylen Brown misses over Damian Lillard that I think normally you can bank on, but it just it creates a difficult situation for Milwaukee to have to overcome the fact that he's always going to be on the floor. I mean, he's one of their best players, but defensively you're just giving up a lot, and especially like you have to. I don't want to always go there, but they had Jrue Holiday in that spot, and certainly that was exact opposite of what Damian Lillard is giving them on the defensive end. And so, I think that's just the two-way thing is just you can't stop thinking about it watching the Celtics and the Bucks play, because it's just there's just an obvious, like, this team has someone that they're all exploiting and this team doesn't.
Yeah, and there was a good article over on SB Nation earlier this year about targeting guys and how the offense actually gets bogged down when teams try to do that. I think the defensive rating, as I take a look at it here, went down. So it improved for teams when the 50 most targeted players and pick and rolls got hunted. And it went down as well by a similar rate when the 50 most targeted players in the league got targeted in isolation. So that defensive rating went down from 115 and on average last year to 112 in the situations where guys got hunted. So the Celtics, I don't have their numbers when they're hunting guys, but their isolation's been great this year. It's been a big part of their offensive success. And they usually do it with a good amount of rhythm or movement. And there's certainly threats if it does get bogged down for them to go to as well. Or if help comes, a lot of times they're passing out of that, which they did in this game as well here. So it's a big part of their offense. And they do it in a way that, as you see around the league, it's not a great recipe for other teams. Like, look at the finals. That's basically all the Mavs did the entire finals was go at Pritchard, go at Hauser, go at Tillman, and it didn't work. And it ended up being a pretty lackluster series for both Luka and Kyrie. Whereas the Celtics are getting guys in actions all the time. And I guess doing it in a variety of positions. I feel like tonight they were playing Tatum off ball at the start of the game. And when they do stuff like that, it's almost always to line up the matchups the way they want to attack them. So I don't know if they wanted to line up Brown against them more often or, use Tatum to get White in the action or whatever they were doing there. I think that was a part of Tatum's night too, is that he was off ball a lot more early than you've seen from him in other situations. So especially late, you saw possession after possession after possession late. They were going after Lillard. They were putting him in tough spots, and the Bucks had to help, and that was leading the 3-pointers.
Yeah, and I think part of the key to the exploiting the guys defensively is that Sam Hauser is somebody that has shown that you don't really want to mismatch. You don't really want to hunt him because he's actually able to hold his own. And so, like, that's, you can hunt guys, but sometimes hunting guys doesn't pay off if they're not actually as bad of a defender as you expect them to be. And I think Hauser over the last year or two has shown that he is a better defender than teams anticipate. Pritchard, I think that was part of why he ended up kind of phasing out of I always forget this, but like in the finals, he really kind of fell out of the rotation. I think that was a big part of why. But you can't do, Damian Lillard's never gonna not play because he's getting exploited. And so to me, it's less even about whether he is so bad of a defender. It's also like you're tiring him out. And he airballed a couple of shots here. I can't say for certain that he airballed those shots because he was working hard on defense. But I remember like during the Eastern Conference semis last year, where Drew Holiday was, being guarded by Donovan Mitchell, and Drew Holiday started just going at him. And he just started saying, and Drew Holiday ended up putting up like 20 plus point performances. And he said at postgame, he said, like, I'm going to make it hard for him because we don't want, to get him tired, wear his legs out. There's an element of that this team is always going to find, offensive guys and just make it a little bit more challenging for them. And so probably contributed to Damian Lillard's lack of offensive contributions is just the fact that he did have to be he was in the action for almost every play, it felt like, down the stretch there.
Yeah, opponents shooting 50% against Lillard this year in, individual matchups. I think notable too, DeLon Wright, who they picked up over the offseason, giving up 59%, did not play in this one. So they're trying to figure out how they can shore up those vulnerabilities that they have. And a big reason is Andre Jackson playing now, that they're able to get another defender out there, another athletic guy. And again, it worked early. They were able to get out on the run, defend in some compelling ways. And Giannis is out there and Brooks doing his thing. Brooke had that great chase down block in this game as well. And he was locked in for a lot of it, but they still lose. And Lillard's defense out there has completely changed the complexion of this team. And, obviously things look like they're on the verge of completely collapsing out there in Milwaukee, which, it's kind of a shame. I think Giannis versus the Celtics has been a great rivalry. These teams have played some great games. It's been a tough matchup over the years. Everyone remembers 2022, which ended up being Tatum's finest moment. So they go trade Drew. I'm sure they had some idea that he was going to end up in Boston. Lillard hasn't worked out the way they thought it was going to here. And I keep saying it. I think I said it last show or whenever they played the Bucks last.
if you don't trade for Drew, on top of everything Drew brought to Boston, Brogdon's been hurt basically ever since. Rob's been hurt basically ever since, right up until the other night. And I just don't think there's any conceivable way that the Celtics win the championship if all things are equal. You know, even Porzingis coming over and being an impact guy, if they had Brogdon and Rob instead of Drew Holiday last year, it probably would have been a bad season if everything was equal. So the way that trade went for both teams is a real inflection point in NBA history now, and a massive moment for both franchises if this is about to fall apart for Milwaukee.
Yeah, certainly. And I think Derek White said this post game today. He said something about like Drew Holiday. We don't win without this guy, you know. And there have been so many games where he has made like 3 or 4 plays in the last few minutes that just totally changed the outcome of the game. And in the playoffs, like he really was one of the reasons why they were able to pull off so many games, so many wins. You know, we could do a whole episode just on that. But I don't know that Milwaukee knew he was going to land in Boston. I've heard various things on that, but the reality is that that was the direct effect of that trade. And it's pretty interesting to remember that like Damian Lillard asking out of Portland is like maybe one of the top reasons why the Celtics won the championship last year. Never would have thought that watching that whole sequence unfold, thinking it really had nothing to do with Boston. And obviously we know just how pivotal he's been. And him and Derek, just having 2 guys like that in the backcourt. I mean, we talk about it like every show, I feel like, so I don't want to go too deep onto it, but like both of them just had massive defensive plays, offensive rebounds, big shots. And it's just, we're so accustomed to it, but it's a big reason why the Celtics are able to overcome, you know, Jaylen and Jayson both having inefficient scoring nights and slow starts and things, is because you just have such a reliable, solid backcourt. And now you have Pritchard too, who's in the mix, who's, you know, doing his thing. So really like the star guard by committee has become like multiple star guards on this team. And I stand by my Derek White all-star take. But he's going to need a couple big scoring performances here just to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, he went cold against Brooklyn and bounced back here, which was good to see. He had the key block in this game on Giannis, 3 of 6 3-point shooting, as well as 6 assists. So he got back to himself tonight. I thought Holiday had the bigger impact, though. 3 and 8 3-point shooting in his own right, a couple offensive rebounds, which he always seems to have, a couple steals, a late steal that pretty much ended the game, as well as the dish out on that possession where everybody touched the ball. That got Tatum at 3 late as well. So key plays for both those guys. And then you add Pritchard into the mix. And again, I was like, are they going to go 3 guards in this game? They didn't. They wanted to go defensive. They wanted to go with size in that second half. But you're still at that point with Pritchard. We should probably talk a little bit more about him before we get out of here. The 5 of 6 start, everything in that first half keeps him in the game. Don't see as much of him, and certainly not as much of his scoring in the second half. He didn't make another 3 after that 5 of 6 start, but so crucial what he gives you early in this game. And I think he had a comment earlier this year to that effect of like, these starters, they aren't always going to have their energy. There's going to be some nights where we come out flat. And so we as a bench, me off the bench, we have to be able to bring energy every night, even if the starters don't have it. And that's exactly what happened in this game. I mean, it could have gotten out of hand as it did a couple times last year up in Milwaukee if he didn't come in and hit all those threes.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing with so much confidence right now. It's pretty, like, I almost want to like go back and watch Peyton Pritchard film from like 2 years ago, because he's just, there's no shot that he doesn't like. He's able to create kind of like broken possessions. I mean, he had that bucket in overtime where it was like, there really was nothing going for him. And then he's posting up, right? He's able to shoot.
He had 5 points in overtime on Friday, right?
6 points.
6, yeah.
He had a jumper and 4 free throws. It was the most of any player in overtime, which, you know, it wasn't like he went off, but it's just the fact that he's in the mix, he's on the floor, and then he's making big plays. He's been their best free throw shooter this team this season. And
he took a technical tonight.
He needs to be shooting the technicals, because I think Tatum missed 2 tonight, or he's missed his last 2. Maybe it was 1 tonight, 1 last game. But
he split a pair tonight.
He split a pair, okay. I always wonder if it's like, this is another question that I wouldn't ask Joe, but I would love to. But like, if it's predetermined, or if it's like in the moment, just someone just goes over there, because you always see those clips.
You know why it is. He's the star. The star always takes it.
No, we know, but he's shooting 78% from the free throw line, and Pritchard's shooting 95%. So I think at a certain point, a 17% difference.
And Derek too. Derek's probably like
Derek's like 90% constantly. So I don't want to die on this hill, but I always think this every time I see Tatum shooting a technical. I also feel like his rate on technicals is lower than his normal free throw rate.
He missed that one to
Almost
start overtime Friday.
Yeah, it's almost like he knows that he shouldn't be shooting them, and so that he misses.
You know who I would ask? Ask Derek.
Ask Derek what?
Ask Derek why he's not taking them.
No, he'd get so nervous. No.
No,
but in
he'd
any
give
case,
Tatum crap.
You think?
Yeah, he's one.
Okay, next time he's at the podium, I'm gonna look right at you, Bobby. One of us needs to ask.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he'll have a good answer on it. And it went the other way tonight, so I am interested to see how that's going to go here. It's a major question with this team.
I guess, yeah, I know LeBron always takes the technicals, but that's also I've always thought
he always
that was
misses
wild,
them.
He always misses them, and he's not a great free throw shooter. It's okay to not be a great free throw shooter if you have elite free throw shooters on your team. But yeah, Pritchard has been. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, finish the Pritchard point because I want to get to the Bucks here.
The last thing I was going to say on Pritchard, I think he is the number one story for me out of the season so far. We're 11 games in, we're 9-2. We're 9-2. We knew that they were going to be. Tatum's been Tatum. Jaylen Brown has had a little bit of an injury, but he'll be fine. Everyone else has been kind of what I expected. Queta has been, those two guys are the big stories to me. It's Pritchard is the fact that he's really establishing himself as like an elite player. And then Queta establishing himself as the backup big and a guy who you really see a high future for. Those are the two big things that are night in and night out feeling like that's the story of this game, even though it's not the story of every single game, but it's just what I didn't really expect.
Yeah, and think about how we've talked with Queta, a guy who you might utilize or see his role grow beyond this year. Pritchard on this contract, which I think is 3 more years beyond this one with $6 million. If something goes the other way with the salary and you have to move off a guard or something here, to just into the future, the fact that as you've talked about with the all-star potential and just how he seems to, with more usage, put out more and take steps each year, all that's so important because he's going to be here, I'd say, for the foreseeable future, despite all the times that the chat has tried to replace him with Lonnie Walker and others here. He's going to be a part of this team into the future. And so, is there starting potential with him? Is there potential for him to step into an even bigger role beyond this year? I think that's important because he's still relatively young. He's still a guy going into his prime here, and he's still a guy who's just obsessive about improving. So everything you're seeing from him to start this year is obviously crucial for this year, but maybe even beyond this year as well, because they have just found gold with his improvement and his ability to get them through. Obviously, as Joe said on Friday, the games where guys are out, games that look like losses that turn into wins during the lulls of the regular season. And here we are again. Friday should have been a loss. This game maybe should have been a loss, and they steal wins from both of them. And that's why I had the Celtics winning more games than they did last year when I made my prediction this year. Is that we just saw this a year ago, and now they even have more pieces and improved pieces to be able to win these kind of games. I guess, the one thing out of this game, Hauser's still not quite there. I don't know. We'll keep an eye on him. Played a little bit less tonight with Brown back. And obviously the back thing's been a topic of conversation with him. So something to watch there. But just a guy who struggled in this game again here who, is dealing with something, obviously, at the start of the season.
Yeah, Hauser and Jaylen Brown are in a similar position a little bit where they both clearly have something going on, but clearly it's not enough to keep them out, and they're playing through it, and it's hard to assess exactly how much is impacting both of them. But yeah, he hasn't found his stride yet this season, but I think that he will. There's enough of a sample size, and he's proven enough. And my favorite stat about Sam Hauser, which I'm sure people have heard, but he's never shot below 40% from three one season in his entire career, college, professional, G League. And so he's a guy that, as much as it might feel like he's hot and cold, he's actually as consistent as they come from a shooting standpoint. And so I think Water will find his level, and he'll find a good opportunity here and to break through, and he'll end up finishing the season similar to how he has in the past. I'd be surprised if it doesn't end up that way, just because he has such a proven track record here.
So Celtics come back to the Garden on Tuesday. They are starting the formerly named in-season tournament, which is now the NBA Cup. They are going to play, of course, in Atlanta's group here. Cleveland is in their group, which is interesting. So that's a team that's going to be right there with them, at least for how they've played early this year, to win their group. Celtics going to play the Cavs on the 19th at home. They're going to play the Wizards on the 22nd on the road. And they have one more game, I'd imagine, here. Hawks, Cavs, Wizards, Bulls on November 29th to wrap up group play here. The quarterfinals, of course, in home cities are on the 10th and the 11th. The semifinals are on the 14th of December. And then the championship out there in Vegas is on December 7th. So it's a manageable group for the Celtics, Wizards, Bulls. The road games at Chicago are sometimes tricky, but that Cavs one's going to be exciting. And the Hawks are obviously a team that the Celtics just dispatched less than a week ago here in Atlanta. So this one shouldn't be too difficult on that in-season trek if you care about it at all here. Still dealing with some injuries, Atlanta is, and Trae Young's off to a brutal start to the year. And the matchups just didn't go Atlanta's way in that last game. And now Jaylen Brown's back in the mix here too. So you're going to see the crazy new court. You're going to see the ugly new jerseys. And, I think even Joe isn't crazy about this tournament here. So I don't know how hard the Celtics are going to go to win this thing this year. But the group's manageable. So I'd have to imagine they're going to be in the mix again here. You either win your group or you're the top finisher otherwise. So the wild card in your conference there. So I hope they're in the mix here. It's fun. It's, a little way to get involved with some of the better teams in the league and pick up some extra games against them. Obviously, that Indiana thing last year ended up being a preview of the East Finals, which went a similar way in terms of competitiveness. So I don't mind this thing. I'm not crazy about it, but I think it's a good way for some of the better teams in the league early to get some extra matchups against each other. So that's why I like it, and the potential of a Vegas trip.
Yeah, it could get fun. I think if it's, right now it's hard because it has to establish legitimacy, something that actually matters. But you have this thing for 50 years, all of a sudden it's something that people actually care about.
Cleveland's going to go at them.
Yeah, certainly. And I haven't caught enough Cleveland. Like, I know that their start has been historic and the pieces have really come together, but I'm looking forward to watching them in full a little bit more because it really, what are they, 12-0 now? Like, that's very unusual to be able to start that way. Nobody really saw the start coming. I don't think people anticipated it. Brand new coach, and suddenly you're remembered that there's a whole lot of continuity here. That core has been together for a couple of years now, so it's fun. We'll see how it goes. There was in the NBA documentary about the Celtics, there was like a million documentaries last year, but in one of them, Al Horford said that them losing the in-season tournament was actually a turning point for them because they kind of had to reflect on how over the years they've lost like all these big games that really matter, the conference finals, the finals. And this year they had the opportunity to win a meaningful game in Indiana and they lost, and they had to look in the mirror and like think about how they needed to be better. And so I was a little surprised to hear that. It was granted it was by the NBA, so maybe it was a little bit of in-season tournament propaganda, but Al Horford did say that. And so I was thinking to myself, like, it didn't seem like they really cared all that much to us. But then I started thinking, remember when they had to beat the Bulls by like 27 or something, and Missoula was howling, and they were cheering in the locker room, watching the results of some other game that had impact on whether they would move forward. So I think they're going to want to win, and they're going to treat this as much as they can with intensity and competitiveness. And also just want to acknowledge, thank you to No Cap, question on the Hauser getting moved to the deadline. I would be very surprised if Hauser got moved because I think that he proved himself in the finals last year. If they trade somebody, it'll be somebody that's not playing at all, like a Springer. It won't be. Yeah, like Sam Hauser's not.
Springer was out tonight. That was kind of weird.
Yeah, left knee tendinopathy. If I'm saying that right. It reminded me of when Pritchard was out for like 15 games a couple years back, but he was already not playing, so it was like he was on the injury report. But
he must have got hurt in the stay ready game.
Maybe, or he's just had a little bit of a knee thing. That's not the first time that's popped up. So I'd be surprised. I think Baylor is going to need some time before he's able to step into the Hauser role. And looks like he had a good Maine debut. I'm going to be in Maine this weekend, so I'll check him out in person, see how he's doing. But I think ultimately, like, Hauser has proven himself in the finals that he can hold up on both ends, and you're not going to get rid of that unless you have something really, 100% foolproof. And I don't think a guy who was just drafted is going to have that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good point in the Chicago game last year. That was a real moment, a unique experience, environment against a team that absolutely, especially in a blowout game like that, that would have been one of the most forgettable games we've ever covered. And it ended up being one of the most memorable games that I've covered. And I said that night. I was like, this was awesome. You had Missoula and Donovan going at it. Like Joe was embracing running up the score to be able to clinch that thing. And that's a great point because he was not high on this thing, but he embraced it that night and was like, those are the rules, so we got to play to them. And so there was a little heat there. Drummond was pissed because they were fouling him. And Joe had to go find him after the game and say something. It was just a really interesting night. And obviously, they hit the target score that they needed to there. So it kept everybody in their seats in a blowout. They were able to reach it. They were able to go into the tournament and ended up losing to Indiana. So it was awesome that whole night, that whole experience. That ended up being a big game for the Pacers too. And as you mentioned, Horford took a lot away from it, as did some of the players on the team from that game. So I hope we get a similar experience this time around. That game's in Boston against Cleveland. So I'm interested to see what the atmosphere is going to be like for that one. Obviously, if it was in Cleveland, it would be nuts with the way they've started and with the chance they would have to steal a win from Boston early on this year. I'm super high on Cleveland, by the way. I always have been. Love Mitchell. Garland's been so much better this year, who I'm not crazy about, but definitely played better or is playing better than he, should have last year. He had some injuries and stuff, including that broken jaw that he had at Boston. Mobley, though, to me, it was always going to be about him. Can that guy finally find something? Can that guy finally play to his potential and unlock his offensive game? And Kenny Atkinson, who I'm sure teams were interested in him. He had different options. Charlotte certainly was one of them when he backed out of that job, but he was Golden State's assistant for such a long time after the Nets let him go, which was stupid in its own right. And now he's there just reinventing that Cavs team. And it's great that they didn't break apart either. They beat the Nets last night. Nets gave them a similar push to the Celtics on Friday, and Cavs ended up coming back down by a decent amount in that game and ended up winning late. And Mobley was just awesome again. He had like 25 and 13 or something like that. So that game I'm really looking forward to. That one's just 9 days away, but the NBA Cup starts first with the Celtics and Hawks Tuesday night at TD Garden. And is it a 7:00 tip, Noah? Is that true?
I think so.
All right. We don't get those often in Boston. Yeah, 7:00.
I love a 7:00 tip.
It makes all the difference for us down there. It makes all the difference for us at the arena.
And Bobby, we got a quote here coming out of Postgame, thanks to Ahmed. Jaylen Brown on Giannis pulling back his handshake in the first half. Giannis is a child. That's the quote. I would love to see how he said it. But Jaylen, those 4 games that he was out, we were missing some fun quotes. He always has something fun to say postgame. I don't know if he actually cared, but I saw Celtics fans weren't happy about that play. And Tatum also was talking about how Missoula called the no call on the flagrant foul ridiculous. You can't miss that. Tatum seemed to echo that. So those are the highs that I'm seeing on Twitter, at least from what was said after the game.
Yeah, he said it with a straight face, but it might have just been a deadpan quote there from him about Giannis. But Brown's not above going at an opponent or starting some beef with somebody or just saying something that's a little bit out of line there. But I love it. I love the fact that he's willing to give us some color there and actually say something interesting. And those teams are going to play again. When are the Celtics and Bucks matching up again here? Because they stacked those games early. I think they have one more coming up soon here. Obviously, the next one will be in Boston, December 6th. So we're less than a month away from these teams meeting for a third time early this year. And who knows where Milwaukee's going to be by then. This could have been a season-saving win for the Bucks, but instead the Celtics turn it around and score their most impressive comeback win of the season so far, down 16 late in the second quarter, and ended up getting a lead by the end of the third here and closing out a close game against the Bucks. Celtics have been pretty good in crunch time this year as well, as they start 9-2, so that was impressive. Tatum scores 30 again. Jaylen Brown comes back from the injury, looks pretty solid, not his best game, but good game for his first night back, and Pritchard saves them in the first half with 5 threes to keep them in play there. Queta gets the backup minutes again at center, so he's still in the mix here, and despite 43 from Giannis, the Celtics end up winning this one, 113-107. They're back on Tuesday at TD Garden. We'll have coverage of Celtics Hawks. We'll see how Tatum did with the ankle there too. Seemed like he was fine, but he ended up tweaking his ankle a little bit in this game, so that's something to watch as well. Show our sponsors some love. Check out Prize Picks. The late game about to get going tonight here in the football world, and a ton of basketball going on right now as well. Use the code CLNS New users get $5 when they play $5 instantly, or $50 when they play $5 instantly. So go check that out with code CLNS. Check out the Game Time app if you want to go to the NBA Cup game or any game early this season. Go and use the code CLNS over on Game Time to get $20 off your first ticket purchase over there. Terms apply. And HelloFresh back on the Garden Report. Great time of year to try that. It's cold. You don't want to go out there and fight the crowds at the grocery store. You want to get fresh ingredients to your door, customizable, and all the rest. Can't wait to get my next box here now that I'm home for a little bit. Go to HelloFresh.com/freegarden and get 1 free breakfast item per box while your subscription's active over at HelloFresh.com/freegarden. For Noah Dalzell, I'm Bobby Manning. Noah probably going to have a new podcast coming tomorrow. And we will be back on Tuesday for Celtics Hawks. Once again, I'm Bobby Manning. This has been the Garden Report. We'll talk to you then.
Wait, Amit's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Porford's out. I think it's an option. That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.